Patricia, I gave your house to my brother. I thought you'd never wake up. Those words hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest as I lay in that sterile hospital bed, the smell of disinfectant burning my nostrils. My wife of 3 years was standing there in the doorway, wearing that navy blue dress I'd bought her for Christmas, telling me she'd signed away the house I'd worked 35 years to pay off. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed like angry insects, and I could barely feel my left hand gripping the thin hospital blanket. My name is Carl Thompson. I'm 58 years old, and this is how my wife tried to steal everything I owned while I was fighting for my life in a coma. Let me back up to that Saturday morning when everything went to hell. I was out in my garage, the one place in the world where everything made sense. Had my coffee cooling on the workbench next to my socket wrench set. Classic rock playing from the old radio perched on the shelf between my paint cans and motor oil. I was working on my 1994 Ford F-150, the truck that had been with me through more job sites than I could count. The garage smelled like motor oil and sawdust, familiar scents that reminded me why I loved working with my hands. Toll pegboard covered one whole wall, every wrench and screwdriver in its proper place. On the opposite wall hung pictures of job sites I'd supervised over the years. Office buildings, schools, housing developments, 35 years climbing from laborer to foreman, one nail at a time. I remember bending down to check the oil pan when the sharp pain shot through my head like someone had driven a spike behind my left eye. The wrench fell from my hand, clattering against the concrete floor. That's the last thing I remember clearly, the sound of metal hitting concrete and my coffee mug shattering when I knocked it off the workbench. Next thing I knew, I was waking up in this white room that smelled like bleach and fear. The machines around my bed beeped like smoke detectors with dying batteries. My tongue felt thick as a piece of leather, and when I tried to move my left arm, it barely responded. The nurse later told me my neighbor Helen Davis had found me collapsed in the garage. She'd been bringing over some of her famous apple pie and heard the radio still playing hours later with no sign of me. 4 months. That's what the doctor said. I'd been gone from the world. 4 months of my life erased. The stroke had been massive, they explained, using words like massive cerebral infarction that sounded more like construction terms than medical ones. They were surprised I'd woken up at all. My speech therapist was this young woman named Carol Anderson, who spoke slowly like I was a child. "Mr. Thompson, you're making remarkable progress," she'd say while making me practice saying simple words, but nothing felt simple anymore. Words that used to roll off my tongue now felt like trying to nail jello to a wall. That's when Patricia walked into my hospital room with that look on her face. Not relief that I was alive, not joy that I was talking again, but something else. Something that made my stomach clench even before she opened her mouth. "Carl, honey, we need to talk about some practical matters," she said, smoothing down that dress like she was going to a business meeting instead of visiting her husband who'd just come back from the edge of death. I tried to sit up straighter in the bed, but my body felt like it belonged to someone else. The physical therapy was helping, but slowly. Everything was slowly now. "What kind of practical matters?" My voice came out raspy, like I'd been screaming for hours. That's when she dropped her bomb about the house. Said it so casually, like she was telling me about changing our cable package. Eddie had helped her with all the paperwork, she explained. Her brother, the real estate agent who'd never thought I was good enough for his sister. The thing is, I should have seen it coming. Looking back now, there were signs. Patricia had been different the past year before my stroke. More interested in our finances than she used to be. Always asking about my pension, my life insurance, what would happen if something happened to me. I'd met Patricia at the VFW hall during a charity function for local veterans. She was volunteering, serving coffee and sandwiches, with this warm smile that made me forget. I was a 55-year-old widower who'd convinced himself he was done with romance. My first wife, Linda, had died of a heart attack 5 years earlier. Sudden as a lightning strike. The doctor said her heart just stopped, like someone had flipped a switch. After Linda died, I figured that was it for me. Figured I'd live out my days in the house we'd built together, maybe do some part-time handyman work to keep busy. The loneliness was like a constant ache in my chest, worse at night when I'd reach across the bed and find nothing but cold sheets. Patricia changed that. She seemed to understand grief, said she'd lost her first husband in a car accident years ago. We'd sit on my back deck, drinking coffee and talking about how hard it was to start over in your 50s. She admired the work I'd done on the house, the custom cabinets I'd built for Linda, the deck I'd expanded myself. "You're so talented, Carl," she'd say, running her fingers along the smooth rail I'd sanded and stained. Linda was lucky to have a man who could build her such a beautiful home. Those words meant everything to a lonely man who'd spent too many nights eating TV dinners in front of the news. We got married 3 years ago in a small ceremony at the courthouse. I wore my best suit, the one I'd bought for Linda's funeral, and hadn't touched since. Patricia looked beautiful in a simple cream-colored dress, and I thought I was the luckiest man alive to get a second chance at happiness. The early days were good. Patricia would cook dinner while I worked on projects around the house. She seemed to genuinely care about making our place feel like home. She even helped me organize my workshop, though she always wrinkled her nose at the smell of motor oil and sawdust. "You spend more time in that garage than you do with me?" She'd tease, but there was something in her voice I should have paid attention to. An edge that got sharper over time. The changes started small. Comments about how the house was getting old, how maybe we should think about downsizing. Questions about my pension that seemed innocent enough. "How much will we have to live on when you retire, Carl?" "I just want to make sure we'll be comfortable." I'd explain about my union pension, my social security, the equity in the house. Told her we'd be fine, better than fine. The house was paid off. My truck was reliable, and we had enough saved to do some traveling if she wanted, but Patricia had different ideas about comfort. She started talking about moving to one of those new retirement communities with golf courses and clubhouses, places that cost more per month than my first salary as a construction worker. We could sell this place and have money to really enjoy ourselves, she'd say while looking around the living room I'd painted myself. "You've worked so hard, Carl. Don't you want something nicer?" I'd built that house from the ground up in 1995, after Linda and I had saved for 10 years for the down payment. Every board, every nail, every piece of trim had my sweat on it. The thought of selling it to move into some cookie-cutter apartment made my chest tight. "This is nice enough for me," I'd tell her. "Linda and I put everything we had into this place." That's when Patricia's face would change, just for a second. A flash of something cold before the smile returned. She didn't like being reminded about Linda, didn't like that my first wife's presence was still in every room. The pressure got worse after I turned 55 and started talking about early retirement. Patricia would bring home brochures for expensive vacation cruises, luxury apartments, things that would eat through our savings in no time. "Eddie says we should diversify our investments." She'd say, "Maybe put the house in both our names officially or set up some kind of trust." Eddie Martinez had been giving her advice about our finances from day one. Her brother always dressed better than me, talked smoother than me, and made it clear he thought Patricia could do better than a construction worker. I should have listened to my gut, should have paid attention to how she never seemed genuinely happy with what we had. But I was lonely for so long after Linda died, and Patricia made that loneliness go away. When you're drowning in silence, you'll grab onto any voice that offers warmth. The morning of my stroke, we'd had one of our biggest fights yet. Patricia wanted to refinance the house to get cash for some investment scheme Eddie was pushing. I'd said no, told her the house was staying exactly as it was. "You're being stubborn, Carl," she'd said, her voice sharp as a razor. "You're not getting any younger. What if something happens to you? What if you can't make these decisions anymore?" Those words echoed in my head as I lay in that hospital bed listening to her explain how she'd solved the problem while I was unconscious. "The doctor said you probably wouldn't make it," Patricia continued, adjusting the flowers someone had brought. The room was sterile white with a view of the parking garage through a window that didn't open. "Brain damage from the stroke," they said. "Even if you woke up, you'd need full-time care." Eddie helped me understand the legal options. Legal options, like I was already dead. "Patricia, that house is mine. I never gave you permission to, Carl, be reasonable." She moved closer to the bed but didn't touch me. "Look at you. You can barely speak clearly. Your left side is practically useless. Do you really think you can live alone in that big house anymore?" The way she said it, like I was already a burden that needed to be managed. The physical therapy was hard, sure. My left hand shook when I tried to pick up a coffee cup. Walking to the bathroom left me exhausted, but I was getting stronger every day. "Eddie found a lovely assisted living facility," she continued, "much more appropriate for someone in your condition. They have nurses, activities, people your age to socialize with, people my age." "Patricia, I'm 58, not 85, Carl. The stroke changed things. You have to accept that." But I wasn't accepting anything. Not yet. Over the next few days, while I worked with Carol on my speech therapy and a physical therapist named Mike helped me regain strength in my left side, I pieced together what had really happened. Patricia had wasted no time once I was unconscious. She'd been telling people I was brain damaged, unlikely to recover, that she needed to make practical decisions about our future. The house was already listed with Eddie's real estate company for $320,000. My retirement security, our home, up for sale while I was fighting my way back to consciousness. But here's something Patricia didn't know about construction workers. We're problem solvers. We look at a job site and figure out how to build something from nothing. And when something breaks, we figure out how to fix it. 6 months before my stroke, after a rash of break-ins in our neighborhood, I'd installed a Ring doorbell system. Spent a weekend running wires, setting up the app on my phone, making sure every angle of our front porch was covered. That little camera had been recording everything while I was in my coma, every conversation, every visitor, every decision made about my property without my consent. I just had to figure out how to use it. When I got discharged from the hospital 3 weeks later, Patricia drove me to a cramped one-bedroom apartment on the other side of town. The place smelled like old carpet and somebody else's cooking. The walls were thin as paper, and I could hear every footstep from the neighbors upstairs. Just temporary, Patricia said, setting my small bag of belongings on a sagging couch until we figure out your long-term care needs. Long-term care needs. I was 58 years old with a stroke, not 88 with dementia. But I played along, acting weaker than I was. Let her think the stroke had made me confused and dependent. Meanwhile, I was planning. The apartment had one window that looked out at a parking lot full of rusted cars and overflowing dumpsters. Nothing like the view from my back deck, where I used to sit every morning with my coffee, watching the sun come up over the oak trees I'd planted myself. My left side was still weak, but getting stronger every day. The physical therapist had given me exercises to do at home, squeezing tennis balls, stretching rubber bands, walking up and down stairs. Patricia watched me struggle with these exercises like she was timing how long it would take me to give up. "Maybe you should just rest, Carl," she'd say when I tried to do my stretches. "You don't want to overdo it," but I wasn't giving up on anything. Every morning while Patricia was out running errands, I'd work on accessing my Ring doorbell app. My right hand was steady enough to use my phone, and slowly I figured out how to scroll through months of recordings. What I found made my blood run cold. The footage started just 2 days after my stroke. Patricia and Eddie on my front porch, Eddie holding a clipboard with official-looking papers. They thought they were alone, thought no one was watching. "The power of attorney looks good," Eddie was saying. "Notary signed off on everything. As long as he stays unconscious, we can proceed with the sale. What if he wakes up?" Patricia asked. Eddie laughed the same laugh I'd heard at family dinners when he told jokes at my expense. "After 4 months in a coma, even if he does, look at the medical reports. Stroke damage will keep him from being competent enough to challenge us." They had no idea my doorbell was recording every word. I watched weeks of footage, Patricia coming and going like she owned the place, Eddie bringing potential buyers to tour my house, my workshop, the deck I'd built with my own hands. They'd moved all my furniture into storage, told the neighbors I was probably never coming home. But the recording that hit me hardest was from about a month into my coma. Patricia was on the phone, standing right in front of my doorbell camera. "No, Mother, I don't feel guilty," she was saying. "Carl's had his run. That house is worth more than he'll ever need for medical bills. Eddie says assisted living costs are reasonable, and the rest will set us up nicely. My life's work, my home, my security, just money in the bank to them. I needed help, and I knew exactly who to call. Terry Johnson had been my best friend since we started working construction together in 1985. He'd been by the hospital a few times, but Patricia always seemed to cut his visits short. I waited until Patricia went grocery shopping, then called Terry from the apartment's landline. "Carl, Jesus buddy, how are you feeling?" Just hearing his voice made me feel less alone. Terry's voice was rough from decades of shouting over construction noise, but it was the most comforting sound I'd heard in months. "Terry, I need to see you. But not here. Can you meet me at Murphy's Diner?" Murphy's was our old hangout, a greasy spoon near the construction company where we'd had lunch probably 1,000 times over the years. If I could walk there from the apartment, I could prove to myself I was getting stronger. The walk took me 20 minutes and left me exhausted, but I made it. Terry was already in our usual booth by the window, looking older than I remembered. His hair had gone completely gray, and his hands were more gnarled from years of hard work. When he saw me shuffling through the door, his eyes went wide. "Christ, Carl, you look like hell. Feel like it too, but I'm getting better." I slid into the booth across from him, my left leg still not quite obeying commands. "Terry, I need to tell you something, and you're not going to believe it." I told him everything. About Patricia and Eddie. About the forged power of attorney. About my house being sold out from under me while I fought for my life. Terry's face got redder with every detail. "That's your house, Carl. You paid every damn mortgage payment yourself. She's got no right." That's what I thought. "But I need proof that'll hold up in court." Terry leaned forward. "What kind of proof you got?" I pulled out my phone and showed him some of the doorbell footage. Terry watched Patricia and Eddie planning their scheme, his fists clenching on the table. "Son of a bitch," he muttered. "Carl, this is fraud, plain and simple, I know, but I need a lawyer who specializes in this kind of thing." Terry nodded slowly. "My nephew Steve works for the Legal Aid Society. Handles cases for working people who can't afford fancy attorneys. He's good people, Carl. Smart as a whip and hates bullies. Legal aid. I'd never thought I'd need charity lawyers, but Patricia and Eddie had stolen my house while I was unconscious. Pride was a luxury I couldn't afford. Can you set up a meeting? I'll call him tonight. But Carl, What's your plan here? You can't stay in that apartment forever. I looked out the window at the street where Terry and I used to drive to job sites every morning. I'm going to get my house back, and I'm going to make sure Patricia and Eddie pay for what they did. How? I smiled for the first time since waking up from the coma. Same way we've always solved problems, Terry. One step at a time with the right tools for the job. Steve Wilson turned out to be exactly what Terry had promised, a young lawyer with fire in his eyes and a genuine hatred for people who prey on the vulnerable. His office was in a converted storefront downtown, crammed with case files and law books that looked like they'd been read cover to cover. Mr. Thompson, Steve said after reviewing my doorbell footage, what your wife and her brother did isn't just morally wrong, it's criminal fraud, elder abuse, forgery. We're talking felony charges here. The courthouse downtown was an imposing brick building that smelled like old wood and serious business. Steve guided me through the process of filing an emergency injunction to stop the house sale. My left hand still shook when I signed the papers, but my signature was clear enough. Judge Williams has seen cases like this before, Steve explained as we waited in the hallway outside the courtroom. She doesn't tolerate people who take advantage of medical emergencies. But I wanted more than just stopping the sale. I wanted justice. And for that, we needed to be smart. Steve helped me set up a sting operation. We arranged a meeting with Patricia and Eddie at Murphy's Diner, supposedly to discuss my care options and financial planning. I wore a wire provided by the sheriff's department, who were very interested in building a criminal case. Murphy's looked exactly the same as it had 30 years ago: red vinyl booths, cracked linoleum floors, and coffee that could wake the dead. Patricia arrived first, wearing a new dress I didn't recognize. Eddie followed in his expensive suit, looking like he owned the world. I played the confused stroke victim, my speech deliberately slower than it had to be. Patricia, honey, I'm still having trouble remembering some things. Did I really sign papers about the house? She glanced at Eddie before answering. Yes, Carl, you signed everything before your stroke. The doctors said your memory might be affected. But I worked so hard for that house. Are you sure I wanted to sell it? Eddie leaned forward with that condescending voice I'd learned to hate. Carl, you're not thinking clearly. The stroke affected your judgment. Patricia is handling everything for your own good. I just wish I could remember signing those papers. I pressed. That's when Patricia made her fatal mistake. Carl, honey, you never actually signed them. I had to sign for you because you were unconscious, but Eddie says it's what you would have wanted. There it was. Clear confession on tape. Steve was sitting 3 booths away, pretending to read a newspaper, trying not to smile. The legal proceedings moved fast after that. Judge Williams reviewed the recorded confession and the doorbell footage with the focused attention of someone who'd seen too much human greed. This is clearly a case of elder fraud and conspiracy, she said from behind her imposing bench. I'm ordering an immediate freeze on all property transactions and scheduling criminal proceedings. Patricia's face went white when the bailiff handed her the court papers. Eddie started sweating through his expensive shirt, probably calculating how much his legal defense was going to cost. Carl, you're making a terrible mistake, Patricia said when we got back to the apartment that evening. We were only trying to help you. Help me right out of my house and my life savings, I replied, feeling stronger than I had in months. I trusted you, Patricia. I thought we were partners. You're sick, Carl. You need professional care. By stealing my house, by forging my signature, by planning to stick me in some facility while you and Eddie split the money. She couldn't deny it anymore. The evidence was overwhelming. The criminal trial lasted 3 weeks. The courtroom was packed with neighbors, union buddies, and people from the construction company where I'd worked for decades. They came to support me, but also to see justice done to people who'd tried to take advantage of a sick man. Patricia got 18 months in prison for elder fraud. Eddie got 2 years for conspiracy and forgery, plus lost his real estate license permanently. The judge ordered full restitution for legal fees and emotional damages. But the real satisfaction came from something else. Word spread through our small town about what Patricia and Eddie had tried to do. In a working-class community where people break their backs to pay for their homes, stealing from a stroke victim was about the lowest thing imaginable. Eddie's real estate business collapsed overnight. His former clients wouldn't return his calls. Patricia's friends stopped talking to her. Even her sister Nancy, who'd helped by providing fake medical opinions about my condition, lost her job at the hospital when they learned about her involvement. I got my house back, of course. Walking through the front door for the first time in 6 months felt like coming back from the dead. Everything was exactly as I'd left it, my tools in the garage, my coffee mug on the kitchen counter, the morning light streaming through the windows just like always. Terry came by that first weekend to help me settle back in. We sat on the back deck with beers, looking at the oak trees that were just starting to turn fall colors. You did good, Carl, he said. A lot of men would have just rolled over and taken it. Couldn't do that, Terry. This house isn't just where I live, it's proof that I built something that lasts. The physical therapy continued for months. My left side got stronger, my speech clearer, but I never forgot how helpless I'd felt in that hospital bed. How it felt to be treated like a burden instead of a human being. I've updated my will now with ironclad provisions about who can make medical decisions if I'm ever incapacitated again. Terry's my designated advocate, with backup instructions that no spouse or relative can override. I'm 58 years old, sitting in the house I built with my own hands, drinking coffee from the same mug I've used for 20 years. The garage still smells like motor oil and possibility. My tools are still organized exactly the way I like them. I learned something important through all this. Trust isn't something you give away easily, but it's not something you have to give up on entirely either. The people who really care about you don't wait for you to be helpless to show their true colors. These days, when young guys at the VFW ask me about getting married later in life, I tell them the same thing. Protect yourself, but don't close yourself off. Just make sure anyone who claims to love you proves it when you're strong, not just when you're weak. Because the best revenge isn't destroying someone who tried to destroy you. It's building something so solid they can't tear it down, no matter how hard they try. Sometimes the people who promise to love you in sickness and in health are the same ones counting your assets while you fight for your life. But that doesn't mean you stop fighting. It means you fight smarter. The strongest foundation you can build isn't made of concrete and steel. It's made of knowing your own worth and refusing to let anyone convince you that being vulnerable makes you disposable.